The Scream Kings are in no way responsible for any encounters with the paranormal, extraterrestrial abductions, eldritch insanity, hauntings, curses, hexes, demonic possessions, cryptozoological sightings, or any loss of sleep that may result from listening to this podcast.
This is the Scream Kings podcast. This is Max George.
And I'm Nathaniel Darkish.
If I am the podcast, it's because man has made me. Ooh, cue spooky noise.
And all that, of course, was just read from a cue card that the audience was supposed to read while dramatic organ music played.
Yes. This is a really fun and exciting episode that we have here. And we have a very, very, very special guest that I'm very excited for. V, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, guys, for having me on. It's a big privilege to be here. I'm VP Morris. I'm an award-winning horror and thriller writer, as well as the creator of the audio drama, The Dead Letters podcast. So just like a background about horror, I kind of got into it when I was about 10 or 11, when my mom showed me Psycho for the first time. She put it on, for all my friends at a little Halloween party I was having, and I was the only one that was into it. Other girls were freaked out, and some others were whatever and bored, and I was the only one that was super glued to the screen and wanted to figure out the psychology of Norman Bates, and I just was something just hit a big chord with me, and I was this, I don't know what this is, but I want it in my life.
Oh man, that movie just rules.
I've also had a similar situation when I was about 10. I dressed up as a vampire for Halloween, but at the time I was a scaredy cat, and so I cried at every single door trick-or-treating because I was so terrified of all the Halloween decorations. And my dad took me home and was kind of upset with me, but we ended up watching Psycho, and it was oh, Halloween can be cool. This movie's awesome. So I resonate with that story. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, Psycho saves the day or turns a scaredy cat into a horror fan.
Yes. Thank you, Norman.
Yeah. And for my favorite horror movie, it has to be The Shining, hands down.
Are you excited for Dr. Sleep?
Yes, I am. And I'm so glad that they're using the Kubrick version, and they're building onto it and not just using the novel as the reference, because I just think it's going to be more cinematically amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And for my scariest, I have a toss-up between The Conjuring and Insidious. When I'm really freaked out about a horror movie that I feel I can't fully watch on the big screen yet, I just watch it in the preview mode in YouTube, where it's the really small one in the corner. And both of those, I had to watch it in the small corner of my screen before I had enough courage to fully blow it up. So those two freak me out the most.
What scares you about The Conjuring? We've done a few episodes about that franchise and that kind of story. What gets you in particular?
That one, it's the general atmosphere is really bleak. Even when the family moves in, it just feels kind of ominous, and just there's no color in it. It just kind of feels depressing as it is, even before the weird stuff starts happening. And I just think the scares are far more terrifying and unexpected, and just Bathsheba vomiting into the mom's mouth, when I forget, Lorraine is trapped in the basement. Just that stuff is just a big no from me. So,
and I'm sure the exorcism scene, bag over the head tearing and Bathsheba's face and the blood is probably not any better.
No,
that's so good. So good, though.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I freaking love that scene.
Right, it's better than her full face being revealed at once. The small rip is far more terrifying. So that was a great choice on the production staff's.
They really just nailed it.
We haven't had an episode about the Insidious movies. I'm curious of what scares you about that, because I love that movie, but the ending is just so not what I wanted it to be, that a lot of the scare factor is lost.
I watched it earlier, I forget, it came out, I think maybe closer to 2010 or 2011, I don't remember, but I was easing myself into more horror, scarier horror at that time, so I just had like less of a tolerance for it, I guess. But on top of that, I feel like The Further is just creepy for me, because at least in The Conjuring, it all exists within our world, and we can, like, physically, like, you could just leave the house, and for the most part, it seems like it would stop. But with The Furthering, like, the kid is trapped there, and it's like this dream place that doesn't really abide by the, like, rules of physics, and I feel like that's far more terrifying than just a haunted house. Not that The Conjuring is just a haunted house, but that part of being, like, trapped somewhere you can't, like, logically figure out is really creepy.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, we might have to have you on when we end up doing Insidious movies, because yeah, like I have very split feelings about all of them, and The Further is the thing that I both like. I want to love it but don't. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's not my favorite way that it could possibly have been executed. I just think that it's creepy that it's not. It kind of reminds me of As Above, So Below, where, like, the logic of the world doesn't, like, make sense. Like, you can be upside down, but it is right side up type of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And V, you mentioned that you're an award-winning podcast host. Tell us about that. Give our fans a rundown of what you do.
Yeah, so about, I think, a year and a half ago, I won an award for my short story called Bloodsuckers. It is a parable about an eating disorder, and it's about a model who wakes up with leeches on her body every night, and she has to figure out why.
Ew, that's gross.
Exactly, and I was not expecting to win at all, because everyone who read it was like, what? And it won, so yay. Win there. I had there was one story that was on Stories of Yours and Your. It's a podcast where he features original short stories as well as classics, and he produced one of mine called Nature is Cruel, But So Am I, about a couple that has, like, anger problems and it turns supernatural. And most recently, I have the Dead Letters podcast, which is up for a Audioverse Award in writing of a new audio play. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I might find out in a few days if I won that. And it's about 5 women who, over the course of history, have been receiving mysterious letters from a sender who warns of death and destruction if they don't do as the sender says.
And if you haven't listened to that one, stop what you're doing after you finish this episode and go listen. I love your Dead Letters podcast. It's fantastic. Oh, it's so good.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll have to have you shamelessly plug that again at the end, so that way there's no chance anyone misses it, because, yeah, definitely worth your time, everybody.
All right. Well, I think it's about time that we get into the meat of this episode. Do you both agree?
Yes.
Certainly.
I want to point out that a few episodes back, we made this funny joke that we are not a French literature podcast. And then V and I exchanged some dialogue on Twitter about how she's actually quite the expert in French literature and would love to be on the podcast. And here we are. So I'm eating crow, and we are now a French literature podcast.
Hell yeah.
Sorry to hijack it.
It's all right. We bring it on. Bring it on.
Yeah, well, you know, if you remember, I was upset about Max hating on French literature, so...
I did not hate on it, I just made mention. I feel like I'm backpedaling.
Yeah. All I'm going to say is, as an English teacher who just spent the first term of my class teaching a bunch of Italian literature, I am... all ready to get into some French literature.
Well, V, tell us what we're going to be talking about. What's on the agenda?
We're going to be talking about The Phantom of the Opera, 1925, starring the late, great Lon Chaney. So...
oh, he's so fantastic.
Yeah, it's super great, and we're obviously going to talk about how it compares to the novel that it's based on.
And yeah, we will bring up the musical and some other stuff that may be more familiar touchstones, but we're going to focus in on the OGs. All right. So I guess just to kick things off, what do you like about the movie?
Well, for me, I'm a big, like, fan of old movies, so just seeing the way, like, history has, like, cinematic history has evolved was really great for me, because like kind of feeling transported back into the past. And I like that there was actually some elements of slapstick going on, like with the stagehand that gets like pulled around by the dancers, and you don't really see that nowadays. It's very, you know, like Chaplin-esque, and it was kind of refreshing to see kind of like an old way of like doing comedy without any voice acting happening in the middle of like a horror thing, and I liked that.
One thing that really struck me as I was watching it is that I really loved like the spectacle of the film. Mm-hmm. They had big sets, big things were happening, the costuming and the makeup, all of it was really just like looked really good. And so I really enjoyed the visual spectacle. And the whole time it actually kind of like made me a little bummed out that they weren't able to have the audio elements to it because, you know, it's the opera. Exactly. And like, you know, you could tell that if they had the chance, they would have gone all in with the audio spectacle as well, with the singing and the dancing and all of that, you know, and the dramatic playing of the organ in the corner. Like those kinds of things were all there. And, you know, those are the things that I think we associate with this the most strongly. And so it was interesting to experience it without that.
Yeah, I have in one of my notes a silent film about music, LOL. And
yeah.
That was like it kind of occurred to me halfway through because I knew it was silent, obviously, going in. And then I just was like, oh, that would be so nice if we could actually hear how good Christine is supposed to sound and like how foreboding the Phantom's voice is, like echoing through the chambers. But you know, I think it still conveyed the general message without having to like showcase the voice. Like I felt the spirit of the novel, so to speak, in it without having to actually hear the music.
Mm-hmm.
And I think nowadays it's kind of difficult for people to get into this 1925 edition because Andrew Lloyd Webber, his, you know, Broadway musical has become so ubiquitous everywhere you go. And so when you do watch this story that is such an endearing story in a silent medium, it doesn't sit well with a lot of people, I think, because they are expecting that pomp and circumstance, you know, of the Broadway.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm glad that Phantom of the Opera, the Broadway musical, exists because it is like a fantastic piece of art in its own right, but I kind of sometimes get upset when that's all that people see Phantom as.
So I'm sorry not to interrupt, but I would love to talk about like the book. I assume you've read the Phantom of the Opera book. Why do you love that?
I love that because it actually scared me more than obviously the musical is, because the Phantom is supposed to be way more of a romantic figure than a horror figure, and there's obviously a lot of sympathy for Eric, which, spoiler, that's his real name in case people don't know that. You get to know him in the novel as well, so it's not like this complete monster, but he's far more foreboding and dangerous than what is seen in the musical. So I actually remember being terrified for like several nights after I had finished the novel for the first time, because I just felt, because he's supposed to look like a living corpse. He's not like halfway deformed the way he appears in other adaptations. It's his whole body. Yeah.
It's not a handsome Gerard Butler with some slight scars on his face.
Yeah. Oh boy, we're not going to talk about Gerard Butler edition.
No.
I refuse.
I mean, I still like the movie because I'm a fangirl and I can't help myself, but I feel like his deformity is just like a bad rash, and that just makes me so mad.
Same.
He just needs some talcum powder. That's all he needs.
No one's gonna get, banished from society for having like what looks like some bad eczema or maybe a sunburn.
So V, why are you a fangirl of the Phantom? Maybe we should have started with that question.
Well, I mean, I started with the musical because, once again, like, my mom was a big fan of the musical, so she just, like, would play the music on occasion, and I just liked the idea of someone who's, like, watching over you and can make things happen for you. I mean, it took me a longer time to realize, like, how bad that is, because he was hurting people for Christine's sake. But just the idea, because, like, a lot of people feel really alone in life, even if they have family and friends and whatnot, and I've definitely felt that myself, and I just thought it would be nice if someone who was, like, watching over me could, like, be into this like invisible force in my life and make all the good things happen. And I kind of...
Your angel of music.
Yes.
Oh, love. The power of love.
Yeah.
Of abusive, coercive relationships.
All right.
Yeah, I definitely see that, though. You know, you want someone who is like your unseen friend kind of thing. Like that definitely has a strong appeal. And then, yeah, finding out that that person has become a monster, you know, and whether or not that's necessarily their, you know, a lot of that has to do with his circumstances. But I think it's, yeah, really heartbreaking to see how, in many ways, he's a victim, but he ultimately decides to go whole hog on the set, you know, murder traps all over just the underground areas of the opera house. And by the way, that's one thing that I actually really, really love in the book that isn't really possible in a lot of the other forms of the show, is just like how elaborate and amazing some of his traps are.
Yeah, that it goes definitely into more of his genius outside of music, because he's also an architect and a magician, and he knows a bunch of different, like, he's a kind of a Renaissance man that's been like shamed by society. So I like that it's not just a musical genius that's been hidden away. It's just like this person who could have been like so amazing and beneficial to society has like kind of been forced to be away from society and kind of hate it.
And I love, though, that the sentiment that you both shared about having kind of this unseen guide. You know, in culture, there are so many people out there who still believe in guardian angels, or even, to take it to the religious sense, in God. Like, there's something humanly comforting about thinking that there's someone who is fighting for you. And I think that right there is kind of why the Phantom of the Opera has been so endearing and has lasted so long. I mean, it's an incredibly powerful story that never is going to go away. We've all been Christine before, where we're struggling and we need that help, and this unseen, magical, strange force comes to help us out a bit.
Yeah.
Regardless if he becomes a murder beast or not, he's still there helping us.
Exactly. Yeah. It's you know, it's a trade-off like everything in life. We gotta take the good and the bad. And yeah, and one thing also I like about the Phantom, before you kind of fully learn the depths of his insanity, is that he sees the potential in Christine, where people have just basically let her live on the sidelines. Like, she's just a dancer, and not even a good one at that. They're just like tolerating her, and she's an orphan at the same time. So the idea of like someone who was like, no, don't just ignore her, she has something going on, is like a nice sentiment. I think everyone kind of wants some like authority figure in some regard to be like, no, this person's special, let them do their talent.
Yeah, let people who are good at things do the thing.
Exactly. That's exactly what's in the book.
I think I'm just now realizing, just as we're going through this, like, I always forget like how late the book was written. You know, it was 1910. So yeah, this was only 15 years after the book came out. That's crazy.
Yeah, I did some internet snooping, and I found out that the president of Universal Pictures actually met Gaston Leroux in Paris and discussed the book deal there. So it kind of like, he seems like such an old figure writing, you know, so long ago, but he actually like met with a president of a film company. I mean, it was still silent, but still, like, it just seems it's more modern, relatively speaking, than one would think.
Yeah, that's bananas. I mean, the things that happen in Phantom are, you know, set in like 1870. But that's still like kind of later than you expect that sort of story to be set in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's, even though it's in France, it's still after our Civil War, so it's technically a bit more modern. And
so V, I think it would be beneficial for our listeners to kind of understand some major plot differences between the book 1925 edition and then the Andrew Lloyd Webber. Do you mind kind of going over some of the bigger changes that happened between those
actually, I have one
medias?
tiny detail before I get into the bigger ones. I noticed in the 1925 one that we watched, one of the characters claims that the opera house was built on top of medieval torture chambers, which doesn't come up in any of the other Phantom adaptations and is just straight up not true. So I just thought that was like a funny thing that they just randomly added into this movie that is not anywhere else in the Phantom universe. I guess it makes it creepier, but it's just straight up not fact.
Yeah. And I mean, like, it was Paris. They could have even, involved the catacombs or something like that, but no.
Yeah, it was like, it's over, medieval torture. I'm like, no, they actually had to build this from scratch. Nothing was there before, but okay, that's fine. But the bigger plot differences is this actually isn't that big of a deal, but it is to me. Christine is a blonde in the book, and she's a brunette everywhere else. She was modeled after a famous Swedish soprano who was blonde at the time that the book is set. And every other adaptation has her as a brunette. I just find that an interesting switch. But in general, Madame Giry is changed completely. She's kind of a, not to sound too mean, but a silly old fool of a woman in the book who takes care of Box 5, which is the Phantom's reserved seat for all of the shows. And she's, kind of your typical, like, uneducated working class woman, and is kind of easily manipulated by Eric. But in pretty much all the other adaptations, she is at the head of the ballerinas and like a force to be reckoned with, and she also is like Phantom's only friend, so to speak, in the opera house. On top of it, the musical that is playing, so in the 1925 and the book, it is Faust, which is very symbolic because Faust is about making a deal with the devil, and you can see where that's going.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And that's the next thing I get to teach in my English class, by the way, and I'm so excited.
Oh, awesome.
Ugh, Faustian bargains. Can I be a guest in your class? And I will teach all of your children how to make a Faustian bargain. Yeah, it's fine. The parents will be cool with it. It's fine.
Anyway, sorry, go on. I just couldn't contain myself with that. I'm like, yes, I get to teach Dr. Faustus.
Yeah, no, I like that parable, and I wish, or that parallel, and I wish that it was in the Weber interpretation, but because they didn't want to take another musician's music, he had to write all of his own. So all of the music that's in there is, 100% his. So it doesn't open with that. It opens with "Think of Me," which is not a song that existed before Weber. And let's see, other differences is obviously, like we touched on, his deformity. The book, he is the most deformed. He looks like a living skeleton with sunken eyes and yellow skin and almost no lips. And he's very, very thin. And he also smells like death, which is a great little feature there that no other adaptation mentions, because I think they don't want to gross anyone else out too much. And Lon Chaney's version, I think, is great. He, as everyone would hopefully know, he did all of his own makeup, so that's all him. But the rest of the versions have him either in a much smaller mask that covers both eyes, or just a half mask to make him a bit more of a average-looking guy with just a somewhat gross deformity, but it's never as bad as the book. Also, the age of Phantom is different. He is about 52 in the book. I mean, he doesn't know his birthday because his parents basically disowned him, so they're guessing about 50, and I believe he's about 50 in the silent version. But in the Weber, I think they age him down to like about late 30s, early 40s, and in the Gerard Butler movie, he is definitely the most dreamboaty of them all. And one other, I guess, difference that kind of creeps me out, and I don't like it, is that in the 04 Gerard Butler version, they age Christine down from 18 to 16. Don't know why that was needed. It makes me a little uncomfortable. But in every other adaptation, as far as I know, she's at least 18 years old. If I'm like, there could be one out there that I'm missing, but the major ones that I know of.
Yeah, that's maybe not the best choice.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's icky.
I don't know why. I mean,
that.
18 is still pretty young, and I just don't get why that happened, but whatever. But a lot of people get weirded out by the age difference in the book, because 50s and a woman who's in her late teens. But in the French upper class at the time, that wasn't actually that uncommon, so I'm not that uncomfortable with the age gap, because that's just sort of how it was back then, but aging her down for no reason just made no sense to me.
Yeah, that just seems like someone's specific thing.
So, I want to talk about Lon Chaney a little bit. When I was doing some kind of back research on Phantom of the Opera 1925, I noticed, I don't want to say negative feedback, but there seemed to be a lot of people who thought that there was a little too much copying from Nosferatu. What do you feel about that? Do you think, I mean, I think he was clearly inspired, but I don't really think it's a copycat type of an issue.
I don't think that it's I haven't seen it in its entirety, but also at the time there's not going to be too much visually that they can do differently than their, predecessors. But I think that Lon does his own thing and makes the story his own with his acting and his makeup. It never occurred to me that those two would be that much similar, other than the fact that they exist at the same time in history.
Yeah, I'm guessing that kind of more boils down to people didn't have any other points of reference, and so they're like, oh yeah, it's like Nosferatu, that kind of thing. So
yeah.
No, totally, and I agree with that.
And it looks like Lon Chaney was actually one of the directors of the film too, uncredited, but that's kind of cool too. Dude did a lot of stuff for horror back then.
Yeah, there's this really cool old photo of him. I can find it, I'll put it on Twitter, of him holding his toolbox of makeup, and it's basically the same toolbox he's had for pretty much his entire career. And so all of these classic, old school horror faces essentially came from this one relatively small size toolbox, when today we need a huge visual effects team on it, but he was just a man with a toolbox, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, he was Quasimodo. He was, he was the guy until Karloff became the guy.
On the French literature topic, do you guys happen to notice that there is such a huge, deformed guy with a heart of gold trope in French literature?
Because,
yeah, because that's just everywhere with, as early as Beauty and the Beast and, of course, Hunchback of Notre Dame. I just noticed that they all seem to like, a lot of the classic writers seem to really like that trope, and I'm trash for that trope, so I'm on board with it. But I just find it interesting that so many French writers sort of continue writing in that same vein.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's probably just, a tried and true, sort of cultural icon in terms of what sort of themes they're playing with there. Basically beauty in spite of their ugliness, that kind of thing. And so,
I think also it's a sense of a hero. You have this kind of deformed or ugly figure who can be redeemed through the power of love or whatever. I think that's a timeless story that we all need to hear at some point.
I mean, that's also good because of, people still do judge books by their cover. People are still very appearance-based. Even, I think we've gotten better, obviously, as a society, but we're still not, the best, because we're human and we all make mistakes and have, negative impulses. So I think these stories are pretty much timeless because it teaches us to, try to not instantly be repulsed by someone just because they might look different or they, have a medical condition, try to be understanding type of a thing. And I just think that that's a great, it always makes me get the feels, so.
Yeah, long-term resonance on that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Also, sorry to backtrack, but I forgot two major differences, and the fandom community, the Phantom fandom, that's with a PH, would kill me if I don't mention it. One of the major differences between the book and the silent film with the Weber adaptation is that Raoul has a brother, and Raoul's older brother is a man about town, and he is trying to get Raoul to be a bit of a womanizer the way he is, and he's completely shocked that he wants to marry a lowly dancer like Christine. Exactly, because
how dare he?
He basically treats chorus girls like the flavor of the week and dumps them, so he's the worst. But that doesn't exist in the Weber adaptation, because I just don't think he had time to add in another character. like that. And there is the infamous Persian, which is a subject to much debate in the people who love Phantom community. He was called Ledoux in this movie. He kind of was the stand-in for the Persian, he is a police chief from Turkey, which was like the last known residence of Eric, and he has been tracking Eric down this whole time because Eric's not a good dude and he needs to be kind of brought to justice for some of the stuff he's done, but he also likes Eric and doesn't want to hurt him. It's a very complicated relationship, and after the silent adaptation, he kind of disappears. I haven't seen, there's one version in the 1960s that I haven't seen, so I can't tell you if it exists there, but there's no Persian or police detective of any kind, and that's one of the bigger things that a lot of people who love the book complain about, because the Eric Persian dynamic, which he's never given a name, is a big part of that book, because it gives Eric a human element, because a lot of his history is relayed through this character, and it also gives it a mystery element, because the book opens kind of like your classic Agatha Christie style book with more of a who could possibly be the Phantom, and is he even real, and what's going on type of a situation. And basically from the opening of the Weber version, Phantom's real. There's no question, there's no investigation, it's just how long is it going to take for Christine to realize what's going on.
Oh, that's interesting. I kind of almost like that better, kind of a mysterious ghost story.
Yeah, it has more of a whodunit feel. Like for a while they think that it's the rat catcher, because he's the one that for the most part like goes to the deeper parts of the opera house because he has to for his job, but that it turns out obviously it's not him. So I liked that at the beginning you kind of are wondering, and there's people who, I kind of hate how dismissive the male characters are of the women characters who are saying that they see Phantom, and they're just like, no. Like the opening with the managers in the silent movie, the old managers are like, hey, you should probably be aware that there's a Phantom here, and they're just like, oh, like, we're not chorus girls, we're rational. I'm just like, okay, thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for saying women can't even see things properly based on them having wombs.
Basically. That hysteria, man. It makes you think phantoms are around. It's crazy. Raoul is pretty dismissive of Christine in pretty much every adaptation. Every time she's just like, there's a man teaching me to sing, and he's just like, oh, delusions. How cute. It's just kind of annoying. And they even have like men, like the male stagehands, say they've seen him. I mean, Bouquet gets killed for it, and they kind of ignore it. So it's like working class men and women don't know what they see, and I'm like, that's not nice. Especially
when it's literally murdering them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at it, because I feel like you're supposed to look at Raoul as a strong like hero character, but kind of as time has gone on, the more I've been like, he's kind of the worst too, just for different reasons.
Yeah, and I wanna talk about that. The Phantom is clearly supposed to be the antagonist of the story, but V, being such a fangirl, what is your take? Is Phantom as truly bad as we're supposed to believe? And I know the whole murder thing is an issue, but putting that aside, I don't know. I think we need to give him some credit, and it's kind of a nurture-nature type of thing here.
I hate Raoul, just straight up. Never been a fan of any adaptation of him, especially the 04 version where he has that wig on and he has like a woman's haircut from the 70s. It's horrible. I hate all iterations of Raoul. There's some that I hate less, like a lot of the Broadway performers, because they're just such, well-trained actors and singers, that I find that more enjoyable just because they are such top-of-the-line performers. But I feel like he has too much insta-love, because he knew her once and was like, oh, that girl I met that one time. Gonna marry her. And it just seems just as pushy as Phantom, because he's pushing his own desires for marriage onto her. And I feel like they're both doing the same thing. Like, they don't know each other that well, either set of relationships in this love triangle, and it would just be, I feel like both of them are just not well thought out situations, because it's just, they want to run away, I think, after like a week together. And on top of that, he seems to have far less interest in her singing career, and the Phantom at least sees her as not just a wife and potential mother. He sees her as a talented woman who can bring music to life, and I like that part too.
Yeah, like, unfortunately, Raoul's approach is more socially acceptable in a lot of ways, but yeah, at the end of the day, it's like, they both basically just like, it's a given that she's mine, which kind of sucks.
Yeah, and I almost wonder if Phantom hadn't existed or had been as instantly like full of rage and murder at the prospect of there being another suitor for Christine, maybe she wouldn't have even liked Raoul. She might have just been like, oh, this guy, okay, I mean, I guess maybe I'll see him for dinner, but I don't know if I'll marry him. But because she was scared for her life and he could take her away from that, I could see how she would want to sort of cling to him in her hour of need.
It's really an interesting dynamic, and yeah, it's really interesting to look at how, like, at the end of the day, like, none of this is great, and I think, yeah, a lot of times people miss out on how broken any given relationship would be if it were a real person, because kind of abusive and manipulative, or very assumptive at the very least, no matter how you look at the relationships in that story.
Yeah, they're none of them are particularly spectacular, but I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like, I don't know, it's hard to pick who is the worst of that situation. They're all, honestly, I think like the managers are kind of the worst, because they're in it for like easy money, and they don't realize that there's no easy money in show business. Like, I mean, I guess that show business is still kind of new, but that just like is laughable from my 2019 perspective, that there's like, oh, being a manager of a opera house is easy. I'm like, and they just are clearly in it for the money and kind of don't take anybody seriously at all.
One could say there's no business in show business. No.
I would sing it, but I know it's copyrighted, so I'm not.
Yeah, I'm just gonna save our audience the pain of hearing me sing.
Yeah, let's keep the ear bleeding to a minimum.
I am no angel of music, as we all are aware.
There is a fun fan theory that I see a lot on the interweb of Phantom people, is that Meg is secretly in love with Christine, and that they have a lot of people write alternative endings where they run away together, and I actually like that. I think it's cute.
Plot twist. I love Meg.
Exactly.
Underrated.
There's another theory that Meg is Phantom's daughter, and I like that one too.
Who's the mother?
Oh, Madame Giry.
Okay, I was gonna say, that's the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah. Because she was, I mean, especially if you use the 2004 movie, she was the one who rescued him, so she was like the only point of contact, and they were teenagers, and teenagers have a hard time keeping things to themselves, so I could just see that maybe things got heated between the two of them, and Meg was the result, and she like married a guy to cover it up, but that's just my own weird delusional thoughts on that.
Scandalo!
Yeah, that's pretty reasonable to look at it through that lens.
I feel like I need to spread that theory like it's hard truth and just see how they react. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, it's truth. I also have a fan theory that, why can't I never remember her name, but, Sarah Jessica Parker in Hocus Pocus, whose character name I always forget because I can't do that in my brain for some reason. My theory is that she never, goes back to the past or whatever happens to her at the end of the movie. She moves to New York City and becomes Carrie Bradshaw, a sex columnist, because she's so obsessed with boys. And the timeline would match up, because it's 93.
This is why we're friends. This is fantastic.
In my mind, that happened. She's secretly a witch who's obsessed with boys.
Nathaniel hates Hocus Pocus, so we better change topics before he starts to rage.
That's fine. I know that I'm in a minority there, and that everyone else is the crazy one.
Yeah.
So one thing I'm curious about, relative to like other adaptations of Phantom, have you checked out other things? Like Phantom of the Paradise, for example. And if so, what did you think?
I actually haven't seen Phantom of the Paradise. I know a lot of people in the horror community love it, and there's kind of like this cool, unique bridge between horror fans and Phantom/musical fans tend to really like that musical. So I see it a lot, like on all the accounts that are Phantom-based that I follow on social media. A lot of them will reblog scenes from it. So I've seen like enough snippets, and Lindsay Ellis, who is that like a cultural commentator. She has a YouTube channel and actually like a book coming out. She did this really cool 3-part breakdown of all the iterations of Phantom. I'll also post that on Twitter if anyone is interested in watching those. And she does mention that. So it's just really, her videos are really cool comparisons, but I like my tried and true LaRue and Weber.
So if you were to talk to someone who has never heard of Phantom of the Opera, where would you start them off at? Would you begin with Andrew Lloyd Webber for kind of the cultural impact it has, or would you start something with the 1925 or 1940 edition?
Or the original book? Or...
Oh, yeah, the book itself.
I mean, it would have to depend on the person, because some people hate musicals, so I wouldn't recommend that to them if they're the type that just, like, cringes at the thought of Broadway.
Well, I hate them.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Which
I'm like, I love Broadway. It's amazing. If you guys
preach.
So I guess to be fair, if you were having that conversation, you'd just be like, well, I guess I'm not going to recommend this thing to you because you're the worst.
Just be like, I recommend that you leave now.
Yeah, there we go.
So yeah, I would, depending on who the person is. So if they don't really like musicals, I would recommend the book to start off with, especially if they might be more like bookish or literature minded. And if they do happen to like musicals and just have been, unaware of the longest running Broadway show, I would definitely recommend that they check out the musical. I do kind of recommend the '04 movie. Just go into it with like a super grain of salt. Like don't expect it to be a masterpiece and ignore the hairdo that's happening on Raoul.
I love super grain of salt.
Yeah.
Just take a giant piece of rock salt.
All of the salt.
One of those Himalayan
salt
lamps. You take that with you. That's my new favorite thing.
Yeah, that's it. Some Himalayan rock salt. Like have a salt rimmed margarita amount of salt while you watch it. I mean, if you love the musical, you'll pretty much love the movie for the most part because it has all the songs in it, and it's it's pretty much the stage version on the big screen, which doesn't always translate well, but I think parts of it do. The lighting is like weirdly overshot and super bright, and it hurts your eyes, so be prepared for that one. But if you don't take it too seriously and you don't want to like go into it being super nitpicky, I think that one's enjoyable.
What would some advice be that you would give to someone who maybe doesn't have a ton of experience with silent films? I know they can be kind of challenging for a few people.
Put your phone away because you gotta read.
Good advice.
And I mean, I actually was pleasantly, or every time I revisit a silent film, I am surprised at how easy it does capture my attention because we're so used to audio, and I kind of, the first few minutes I'm just like, I wish this had sound, and then I get caught up in the story, and I don't even notice it, and because you can't really look away or you'll miss something, I find myself way more invested than I thought I would be. So put the phone away, kind of make it more of a movie theater environment, especially if it's like your first time in and you don't know if you're gonna like silent, and they're usually relatively short, so it's not too much to take out of your day to do.
Yeah, I would say also see if you can find like an especially good print of it, because I know for me more than anything with the silence, for me it was just the visuals were sometimes just hard to make out what was going on the screen. So if you can find a nice Blu-ray edition, that would be the way to go.
Yeah, definitely. Because, some of them haven't survived as well as other silent films have. I was just talking with my boss that was Charlie Chaplin for Halloween, and we were talking about Modern Times and City Lights. So those are also, if you don't want to watch anything that's like horror or that is Phantom, those two are great movies from the same time period-ish. So. And
they're hilarious.
Yeah, and they're fun and sweet.
All right. I think that's about everything I have written down, at least as far as my notes go. Nathaniel, did you have anything else?
Nothing else is really coming to mind.
V, how about you?
I think I'm good. I have one line that I don't have any context for that I think is hilarious, and I'm just gonna put that out there. I just wrote goth AF, and I don't know what that was, what scene that was supposed to be, but I guess the whole thing is goth. But I think there was some line. I know it was in this when Christine is down with him around the time his mask gets ripped off. But I just feel like there was something around there. The whole thing is goth, but I don't know why. That was my little random thought, which was like, this is goth AF, man, and without context, it's kind of funny. But yeah, that's all that I've got.
I had one final question though for you, which is the most important question of them all. What are your three favorite Broadway musicals now that I know you love them so much?
Oh, that's so hard. So Phantom's number one because you can't go wrong with it. I'm sorry.
It is?
Yeah,
what?
I know. What?
I'm shocked.
No
Shocked.
way. Even though everyone in this musical makes such bad choices, Rent.
That's so good, though.
Yeah, it's so good. But like when I first heard about it when I was a teenager, I just was like, yeah, fight the power. And then I just like watch it again. I'm like, no, don't do heroin. What? No, stop.
Also, just pay your rent,
just
people.
Pay your rent. It's the Village in the 80s. It can't be that expensive, man.
And especially don't do heroin with people who have AIDS. No, what are you doing?
Oh, man. I mean... Yeah.
And for my third, it's really because I like one song from it the most. I love Spring Awakening, and
it's so good.
The song "Touch Me" is like one of my favorite Broadway songs of all time. So that's part of the reason why it's so high on my list. Even though I find the story super sad.
Yeah, it's tragic, but it's a fantastic piece of art.
So those are all my favorite. But honestly, I want to see all of them. That Moulin Rouge is now on Broadway, and I am dying to see it.
It's all right.
It's
It's not the greatest. Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it. I just listen to the music.
I don't want it to ruin the movie, but at the same time, I want to see it live. I don't know. See how I feel.
We are now a musical podcast as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, I gotta tell my wife this, who was a theater major, and she'll be like, "What's up? Why wasn't I in this this episode?"
Well,
true.
you'll have to have her on to review Moulin Rouge, obviously, because
Yeah.
that's what you guys are doing now.
Yeah.
we are at that level.
Hey.
She already knows about it, by the way, Nathaniel.
Okay.
Beetlejuice is on Broadway, so they're
It's so good.
yeah, there's a little crossover there.
My 4-year-old daughter has turned down listening to Frozen instead to listen to Beetlejuice.
Yes.
And it's the proudest I've ever been.
That's awesome. No, you parented so hard there. You win. Dad of the year.
Woohoo!
Yeah, and my 3-year-old is obsessed with the Addams Family right now, especially the Addams Family musical.
Yes, that all wins. Awesome dad awards to both of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, do what we can.
All right. Well, V, thank you so much for being on our show.
Thanks for having me. It's been so much fun.
Do you want to give us one more shout out for where people can find you and all that?
Yeah, so you can find my show, The Dead Letters Podcast, on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, Spotify, and Google Play Podcasts. It's also on Twitter at Dead Letters Pod, as well as Facebook under the same handle.
Awesome. And I believe I saw that you have a website for you as a writer as well as that.
Yeah. If you want to just know more about me and what's going on, I'm in the process of trying to get a literary agent, so hopefully one day I might have some good news about the novels that I've written. So that's vpmorris.com. Also my handles, if you want to just say hi on my personal social media, it's TWriteRepeat, and that's TAWRITE Repeat on Twitter and Instagram.
All right. Well, I guess that only leaves one thing. Stay spooky.
Stay spooky.
Need even more Scream Kings? Here's our obligatory shameless social media plug. Follow us on Twitter or Instagram at Scream Kings Pod. You could also email us at screamkingspodcast@gmail.com. Help us reach a wider audience of horror fans by leaving a review on iTunes or by sharing a link on social media. You can also support the show by going to patreon.com/Scream Kings. Stay spooky.